The altimeter unwinds like a broken clock. 8,000 feet, 6,000, 4,000. The Douglas SBD Dauntless screams toward the Pacific in a near-vertical dive, engine howling, airframe shuddering under forces it was never designed to sustain. Behind the pilot, the rear gunner grips his twin Brownings and watches 6 Japanese Zeros follow them down, black silhouettes against the morning sun, closing fast with cannon fire, stitching the air in bright tracers. The safe pull-out altitude for a dive bomber is 2,500 feet. At 2,000 feet, the pilot still is not pulled back on the stick. The altimeter needle spins past 1,500. The rear gunner starts praying. The Zeros follow, committed now, sensing the kill. Their radios crackle with urgency, voices rising in pitch as the ocean surface fills their windscreens. Pull up, pull up. The Japanese pilots are not talking to the American. They are talking to each other. The smell inside the cockpit is hydraulic fluid and fear. The SBD's dive brakes are fully extended, massive perforated panels that turn the aircraft into a controlled missile. But at this angle, at this speed, control is a relative term. The stick vibrates so hard, it blurs. The engine temperature gauge climbs into the red. Through the oil-streaked windscreen, the ocean is no longer a distant abstraction. Individual waves are visible now, white caps and foam, the texture of water that will hit like concrete at terminal velocity. The pilot's hands are steady on the controls. His breathing is measured. He is counting, not prayers, calculations. 200 feet. The Zeros are 400 yards behind, closing. Their pilots are the best Japan has, veterans of China and the Philippines, men trained to exploit every weakness in American doctrine. And American dive bombers have one glaring weakness. After the bomb drop, they must climb out, slowly, laboriously, converting speed back into altitude. That is when the Zeros strike. That is when crews die. Every manual, every briefing, every combat report says the same thing. Dive, drop your payload, get altitude, get home. Do not deviate. Do not experiment. The mathematics of survival are written in blood. 1,000 feet. The rear gunner sees the first Zero pull-up breaking off the pursuit. The pilot's nerve has cracked. 2 more Zeros follow, peeling away hard, their wings flexing under the G-forces of the emergency climb. But 3 Zeros are still there, still committed, still following the bomber down past the point of reason. Their closure rate exceeds 500 miles per hour. At this altitude, at this speed, there is no margin for error, no second chance, no time for thought. 800 feet. The pilot pulls, not gently, not gradually. He hauls the stick back into his lap with both hands, every muscle in his arms and shoulders contracting against the force. The Dauntless shudders, the wings flex upward, the G-forces slam him into his seat, his vision tunnels, blood drains from his head, the ocean fills the windscreen close enough to see the shadows of clouds on the surface, and then the nose lifts. The horizon appears, the aircraft arcs out of the dive, belly skimming the waves, propeller throwing spray, and climbs. Behind him, 3 Zeros hit the water at 400 miles per hour. They do not skip. They disintegrate. The Pacific Theater in 1943 does not forgive mistakes. It does not offer second chances. The ocean stretches in every direction, empty and indifferent, swallowing wreckage and men without ceremony. Above it, American dive bombers operate under a doctrine refined through 2 years of brutal trial and error, and that doctrine is failing. The Douglas SBD Dauntless is the Navy's primary ship killer, a sturdy aircraft designed for one specific mission profile: climb to altitude, locate the target, roll into a near-vertical dive, release ordnance at 2,500 feet, pull out, climb away. In theory, the dive bombing approach is devastatingly accurate. The Norden bomb sight mounted in the cockpit allows pilots to drop payloads with precision no level bomber can match. In practice, the moment after the bomb release is when crews die. The numbers tell the story. In the 6 months following Midway, dive bomber squadrons operating from carriers like Enterprise and Yorktown report loss rates exceeding 40% on missions where Japanese fighters are present. The kills do not happen during the dive. They happen during the climb-out, when the SBD is slow, vulnerable, converting kinetic energy back into altitude at a rate that makes physics students wince and combat pilots die. The Mitsubishi A6M0 is purpose-built to exploit this weakness. It climbs faster than any American fighter in service, it turns tighter, it carries 20mm cannons that can shred a Dauntless from 600 yards. Japanese pilots have refined their interception tactics into a brutal science. They wait high and distant during the American bombing runs, watching, patient. The moment the SBDs pull out and begin their climb, the Zeros dive. They build speed, they close the gap before the bombers can gain protective altitude. By the time the rear gunners acquire them, it is too late. The math is unforgiving. A Zero diving at 380 miles per hour versus a Dauntless climbing at 140. The closure rate gives American gunners perhaps 8 seconds to track, lead, and fire. Most miss. Some hit. None of it matters when 20mm shells start walking up the fuselage. Squadron commanders try adjustments. They schedule missions at dawn when visibility favors the attackers. They assign fighter escorts when fuel range allows. They alter approach vectors and vary altitudes. The losses continue. Intelligence officers study wreckage, interview survivors, compile reports thick with diagrams and recommendations. The consensus is clear. The SBD's post-attack climb is a death sentence. There is no tactical solution. The aircraft is simply too slow, too heavy, too committed to a flight profile that turns it into a target the moment its bomb falls away. Pilots know this. They brief it, they accept it. Some pray, others drink. A few, very few, sit in the back of ready rooms with notebooks and pencils, sketching dive angles and calculating terminal velocities, searching for an answer in physics that doctrine cannot provide. Most of those men are ignored. One is not. Harold Emerson does not look like a naval aviator. He is tall and thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the humidity and hands more accustomed to chalk than a control stick. His voice is soft, his manner careful, and his approach to flying methodical to the point of obsession. Other pilots call him Professor, sometimes with affection, more often with the faint condescension reserved for men who think too much and feel too little. He does not drink heavily. He does not chase nurses. He does not tell war stories in the ready room. After missions, he disappears to his bunk with a worn notebook and a mechanical pencil, filling pages with equations, sketches, and observations that make sense only to him. He is 29 years old, older than most fighter pilots, older than the commanders who assign him missions he never requested. Before the war, Emerson taught physics at a rural high school outside Eugene, Oregon. His students were farm kids, loggers' sons, children who would inherit land and timber rights and saw little use for kinetic energy equations or terminal velocity calculations. Emerson loved teaching anyway. He found beauty in the precision of physical laws, in the elegant simplicity of F equals ma, in the way mathematics could predict the arc of a thrown baseball or the stopping distance of a truck on a gravel road. His classroom had a wall covered in hand-drawn diagrams, vectors, forces, parabolic trajectories. He taught not because the students needed physics, but because he needed them to see that the world operated according to rules, and understanding those rules gave you power. Pearl Harbor changed everything. Emerson volunteered within a week, driven not by patriotism or rage, but by something quieter and harder to name. A sense that his particular skills might matter, that understanding how things fell, how they moved through air, how speed and mass and angle interacted, might translate into something useful. The Navy accepted him, tested him, and sent him to flight training. He did not excel. His landings were too cautious, his formations too loose. Instructors noted his technical aptitude but questioned his aggression. "He thinks like an engineer," one evaluation read, "not like a warrior." He passed anyway. The Navy needed pilots, standards bent. His first squadron assignment was aboard USS Hornet. He flew 8 missions, competent but unremarkable, before being transferred. No explanation given. His second assignment lasted 4 months before another transfer, then another. He accumulated hours, logged sorties, survived, but never commanded respect. Squadron mates saw him as competent but odd, reliable but unexciting. He did not fit the mold. Fighter pilots were supposed to be instinctive, aggressive, cocky. Emerson calculated. He hesitated. He asked uncomfortable questions during briefings, questions like, "Why do we always climb out the same way? What if we use the dive itself as a weapon? What if speed downward mattered more than altitude upward?" The answers were always the same. Doctrine exists for a reason. Follow it. Stop thinking. Fly. The reassignments follow a pattern. Emerson flies well enough to avoid being grounded, but not well enough to earn trust. His logbook fills with missions, but his role remains peripheral. He flies wing positions, backup runs, reconnaissance flights where the risk is lower and the glory non-existent. Squadron leaders tolerate him because pilots are scarce and his technical skill keeps his aircraft flying when others would abort. But they do not promote him. They do not invite him into planning sessions. They do not ask his opinion. He is a spare part, functional, but forgettable. And he knows it. The comments in his fitness reports are consistent. Lacks aggressive instinct, overthinks tactical situations, tendency to question established procedures. One commander writes that Emerson would make an excellent instructor, but questions his suitability for frontline combat operations. Another notes that his crew trusts him, but his peers do not. The subtext is clear. He does not belong. Not because he lacks skill, but because he lacks the personality the Navy wants in its dive bomber pilots. He is too careful, too cerebral, too willing to see problems where others see only orders. Between transfers, Emerson keeps studying. He collects after-action reports from other squadrons, reads intelligence summaries on Japanese fighter tactics, sketches the geometry of engagements in his notebook. He begins to see something others miss. The Zeros always attack the same way, high and fast during the climbout. They rely on speed and altitude advantage. They commit to pursuit angles that assume the bomber will behave predictably, climbing steadily, presenting a target that grows slower and easier to hit with every second. The doctrine teaches bombers to escape vertically because altitude equals safety. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if climbing makes you more vulnerable, not less? What if the safest place is not up but down? He tries to explain this to a squadron operations officer during a briefing. The officer listens with visible impatience, then cuts him off. "The dive is for bombing, Lieutenant. The climb is for survival. We do not have the luxury of experimenting. Men die when pilots freelance." Emerson does not argue. He has learned that arguing accomplishes nothing, but he does not stop thinking. He runs calculations in his head during missions, estimating dive angles and pull-out forces, comparing the structural limits of the SBD against the performance envelope of a Zero. The numbers suggest something radical. A Dauntless can dive steeper and pull out harder than a Zero. The American aircraft is heavier, sturdier, built to absorb punishment. The Zero is light, fragile, optimized for maneuverability at the cost of structural strength. In a pure dive, physics favors the bomber, but only if the pilot is willing to push past every safety margin, past every instinct, past the point where reason says to pull out. Only if he is willing to bet his life on math. August 12, 1943. The ready room aboard USS Enterprise smells of coffee, cigarette smoke, and mildew. Pilots crowd wooden benches, some writing letters, others staring at nothing, waiting. The briefing officer enters carrying maps and reconnaissance photos, still wet from development. The room quiets. The target is a Japanese convoy near Rabaul, 4 transport ships escorted by destroyers, moving south under heavy air cover. Intelligence estimates at least 20 Zeros operating from nearby airstrips. The mission profile is standard. Launch at 0600, fly low to avoid radar, climb to bombing altitude 30 miles out, execute dive attacks, egress east toward open water, expected losses, moderate to high, fighter escort, none, range limitations. The pilots absorb this without comment. Moderate to high means half might not return. Emerson sits in the back row, notebook open, pencil moving. He sketches the approach vector, calculates fuel consumption, estimates the timing of the Zero response. The Japanese fighters will not engage during the dive. Too much risk of collision. They wait for the climb out. They position themselves high and sunward, patient. Then they dive when the bombers are slow and vulnerable. Emerson has watched it happen, has seen bombers clawed out of the sky during that climb, and he has been calculating for months how to turn that predictability into a weapon. The briefing officer assigns aircraft and crews. Emerson draws tail number 23, an older SBD with patched bullet holes and an engine that runs rough but reliable. Chen will fly rear gun. Whitmore will navigate. The officer mentions this mission is high risk. Crews may decline without prejudice. No one declines. Emerson looks at Chen, who nods once. Whitmore is already studying the maps. After the briefing, Emerson walks to the flight deck. The sun is setting, painting the ocean in shades of orange and purple. Maintenance crews swarm over the aircraft, fueling, arming, checking control surfaces. Emerson finds tail number 23 and walks the perimeter slowly, running his hand along the fuselage. The dive brakes are fully functional, the hinges freshly greased. He checks the control cables personally. Chen appears beside him, wiping gun oil from his hands. "You planning something, Lieutenant?" Emerson does not answer immediately. He looks out at the horizon, at the empty sky, where tomorrow they will fly into a swarm of Zeros with no support and slim odds. Finally, he says, "Just math, Chen, just math." That night, Emerson lies in his bunk and runs the calculations one final time. Terminal velocity of an SBD in a 70-degree dive, approximately 410 miles per hour. Maximum safe pull-out altitude, 2,500 feet per the manual. Structural G limit, 7 positive Gs per the manual. But manuals are written conservatively. Engineers build in margins. The actual airframe can handle more, maybe 9 Gs, maybe 10, before something critical fails. A Zero, lighter and less robust, begins experiencing structural failure around 8 Gs. If Emerson dives past 2,500 feet, past 2,000, past every altitude where doctrine says to pull out, and if he pulls hard at the last possible second, the Dauntless will survive. The Zeros following him will not. The math works. Tomorrow, he will find out if theory translates to survival. Harold Emerson was born in 1914 in the small logging town of Creswell, Oregon, population 412. His father ran the town's only general store. His mother taught at the one-room schoolhouse. The house smelled of wood smoke and paper, filled with books his mother ordered from Portland, volumes on science and mathematics that seemed out of place in a town built on timber and rail. Dinner conversations revolved around ideas, not gossip. His father would ask questions. What makes a tree fall the way it does when cut? Why does a river bend? Emerson learned early that the world operated according to rules, and those rules could be understood if you paid attention. He attended Creswell Elementary, where his mother was his teacher for 6 years. He was neither popular nor bullied, simply invisible. He built model gliders from balsa wood, spent hours adjusting wing angles and testing flights from the hayloft of a neighbor's barn. He kept notebooks filled with observations. Glider number 7, wing angle 12 degrees, flight time 8 seconds. Glider number 8, wing angle 15 degrees, flight time 11 seconds. He was methodical even then, treating play like research, searching for patterns in how things moved through air. High school took him to Eugene, 12 miles south, where he boarded with an uncle and attended a larger school with science labs and a real library. He joined the mathematics club, won a regional physics competition, and graduated in 1932 with a scholarship to the University of Oregon. His major was physics, with a focus on mechanics. He loved the elegance of equations, the way complex motion could be reduced to simple formulas. Professors described him as diligent but not brilliant, the kind of student who earned grades through effort rather than intuition. After graduation in 1936, he returned to Oregon and found work teaching high school physics in a rural district outside Eugene. The pay was modest. The students were indifferent, but Emerson loved it anyway. He spent evenings preparing demonstrations, building ramps to show acceleration, dropping objects from ladders to illustrate gravity. Most students tolerated his enthusiasm without sharing it. A few began to see the world differently. They noticed how a baseball curved, how a truck's brakes heated up on long descents, how a falling leaf spiraled instead of dropping straight. December 7, 1941 changed everything. He heard about Pearl Harbor on the radio while grading papers. The next morning, he drove to the Navy recruiting office in Eugene and volunteered. The recruiter looked at his glasses, his thin frame, his age, and suggested he might serve better in a technical role. Emerson insisted on flight training. The recruiter shrugged and processed the paperwork. Flight training at Naval Air Station Corpus Christi was harder than Emerson expected. He was older than most cadets, slower to develop muscle memory, prone to overthinking maneuvers that required instinct. His instructors noted his technical understanding but worried about his lack of aggression. He flew cautiously, always calculating margins, always thinking ahead. One instructor wrote, "Understands aerodynamics better than most, but hesitates under pressure." Emerson passed, barely, and was assigned to dive bombers. He told himself that hesitation was not weakness, it was precision, and precision applied correctly would keep him alive long enough to matter. Emerson does not talk about his theory. He knows how it will sound. Reckless, suicidal, a violation of everything naval aviation teaches about dive bombing, but he cannot stop thinking about it. Between missions, he collects data. He reads every after-action report he can access, looking for patterns in how Zeros attack retreating bombers. The pattern is consistent. The Japanese fighters always pursue from above and behind during the American climb-out. They rely on their superior climb rate and speed advantage. They commit to attack angles that assume the bomber will continue climbing steadily, presenting a predictable target that grows slower and more vulnerable with every passing second. Emerson sketches the geometry in his notebook. A Zero diving from 8,000 feet at a bomber climbing through 4,000 feet, the buoy closure rate, the angle of attack, the firing solution. He calculates the point at which the Zero commits, the moment when the Japanese pilot has locked onto his trajectory and cannot easily adjust. That moment, Emerson realizes, is the vulnerability. Once committed to the dive, the Zero must either complete the attack or pull out. And pulling out requires time, space, and structural integrity. He begins testing variables during training flights. Not the full maneuver, nothing that would alert his commanders, but pieces of it. He practices steep dives, pushing past the recommended pull-out altitudes by small increments, feeling how the aircraft responds under extreme G-loads. He learns the sounds the Dauntless makes when stressed. The creak of the airframe. The whistle of air through the dive brakes. The shudder that warns of an approaching stall. He learns to read the aircraft through his hands and body, to sense when he is approaching the edge of the performance envelope, his ground. Crew notices the wear. Chief Kowalski, a mechanic from Pittsburgh who has kept Emerson's aircraft flying through 40 missions, pulls him aside one afternoon. "You trying to kill yourself, Lieutenant? The stress marks on the wings are worse than combat damage." Emerson does not lie. He says he is testing limits. Kowalski stares at him for a long moment, then shakes his head. "Just make sure you know where those limits are before you cross them." Emerson runs the numbers again. The SBD's maximum G-load before structural failure, approximately 10 Gs in clean configuration, slightly less with ordnance. A Zero's structural limit, around 8 Gs. The SBD is built heavier, reinforced for carrier landings and dive attacks. The Zero is built for agility, sacrificing strength for maneuverability. In a pure dive, followed by a violent pullout, physics favors the American aircraft, but only if the pilot is willing to dive deeper than doctrine allows, deeper than sanity suggests, and pull out with forces. That will gray vision and stress the airframe to its breaking point. Emerson is willing. He has spent months preparing. Tomorrow, over Rabaul, he will either prove the theory or die testing it. The launch begins at 05:47 hours. The catapult officer signals. Emerson advances the throttle. The SBD lurches forward, pushed by steam and physics, and leaves the deck at 65 knots. The ocean drops away beneath him. He climbs into the dawn, forming up with 11 other bombers in a loose V formation. No fighter escort, just dive bombers and empty sky. The flight to Rabaul takes 90 minutes. They fly low to avoid radar detection, skimming the wave tops, then climb at the designated point to bombing altitude. At 12,000 feet, Emerson can see the convoy, 4 transport ships in a line, destroyers flanking them, wakes white against the dark water. The formation leader signals. The bombers roll into their dives one by one. Emerson is fourth. He pushes the stick forward. The nose drops. The altimeter begins its backward spin. The dive brakes extend with a metallic thunk, stabilizing the descent. Through the windscreen, the target grows larger. A transport ship, deck crowded with equipment, moving south at 12 knots. Emerson centers it in his sight. At 3,000 feet, he releases. The bomb falls away. The aircraft lurches upward, suddenly lighter. He pulls back on the stick, beginning the climb out. Standard procedure. Exactly what doctrine demands. Exactly what the Zeros are waiting for. They appear at 10,000 feet, 6 black shapes diving out of the sun. Chen calls them out. Bandits high, coming fast. Emerson acknowledges. His heart rate does not change, as he has been expecting this. He continues climbing, slow and steady, playing the role of the vulnerable bomber perfectly. The Zeros close to 2,000 yards. 1 at the 500, 1,000. They are committed now, locked into their attack trajectory, diving at over 400 miles per hour. Emerson counts seconds, waits. The first Zero opens fire at 800 yards. Tracers arc. Past the canopy, bright and slow-looking. Chen returns fire, his twin Brownings hammering. The other bombers are scattering, breaking formation, running. Emerson does not run. At 600 yards, he does something no doctrine has ever taught. He pushes the stick forward, hard. The nose drops. The SBD transitions from climb to dive in 2 seconds. The altimeter, which had been winding upward, reverses. 4,000 feet, 3,500 meters. The Zeros, committed to their high-speed dive, cannot adjust quickly enough. They flash past above him, overshooting, their attack geometry destroyed. But 3 of them do not break off. They follow him down. Emerson extends the dive brakes fully. The aircraft shudders, stabilizes, accelerates. 20,500 feet, the safe pull-out altitude. He does not pull out. 2,000 feet. The ocean fills the windscreen. Chen stops firing. He is praying now, words Emerson cannot hear over the engine roar. The Zeros are 300 yards behind, following, committed. Their pilots are screaming into their radios. Pull up, pull up. But they are not talking to Emerson anymore. At 800 feet, Emerson pulls. He does not ease back. He hauls the stick into his lap with both hands, every muscle in his shoulders and arms contracting against the force. The G-forces hit like a wall. His vision tunnels immediately. Gray creeps in from the edges. His body feels like it weighs 800 pounds. The seat presses into his spine. Blood drains from his head. He cannot see the instruments. He can barely see the horizon. but he can feel the aircraft respond. The nose lifts, the wings flex upward, metal groaning. The ocean's surface is close enough to see individual white caps, close enough that spray from the prop wash mists the windscreen. Then the horizon appears. The nose continues upward. The dive becomes level flight. Emerson eases the stick forward slightly, reducing the G-load. His vision clears. He is at 200 feet, still alive, still flying. Behind him, the 3 Zeros are not so fortunate. The first hits the water at 420 miles per hour. It does not skip. It does not tumble. It simply stops existing. One moment it is an aircraft. The next it is debris and spray and a rapidly spreading oil slick. The second Zero pilot sees what is happening and pulls desperately, hauling back on his stick with both hands. The aircraft begins to arc upward, but the G-forces are too much. The wings fold. They tear away from the fuselage at the root, snapping like balsa wood. The Zero tumbles, wingless, and hits nose first. The third pilot pulls out successfully, barely, skimming the surface so low his propeller throws water. But he has bled all his speed in the emergency maneuver. He climbs slowly, vulnerable. And Chen tracks him with the rear guns. A 3-second burst. Tracers walk across the Zero's engine cowling. Smoke pours out. The fighter rolls inverted and goes in. The other 3 Zeros that broke off earlier are circling at altitude, uncertain. They have just watched 3 of their squadron mates die chasing a single bomber. They do not press another attack. Emerson does not climb. He stays low, racing east toward open water at 300 feet, maximizing distance before the Zeros can regroup. Chen swivels his guns, tracking the distant fighters, but they do not pursue. After 10 minutes, they disappear. Emerson maintains course for another 20 minutes, then climbs gradually to cruising altitude. The return flight is silent, except for the engine drone. Chen finally speaks over the intercom. "What the hell was that, sir?" Emerson's voice is steady. "Physics, Chen, just physics." They land aboard Enterprise 2 hours later. The deck crew counts 8 returning bombers. 4 did not make it back. Emerson taxis to his spot and shuts down the engine. The sudden silence is jarring. He sits in the cockpit, hands still gripping the stick, and realizes they are shaking. Chen climbs out first, his legs unsteady. Kowalski approaches, sees the stress marks on the wings, the G-load indicators pegged in the red, and says, "Nothing." He just shakes his head slowly and walks away. The debriefing happens in a cramped room below the flight deck. An intelligence officer sits across from Emerson with a notepad and skeptical expression. He asks Emerson to describe the engagement. Emerson does, methodically, without embellishment. The officer stops writing when Emerson mentions diving past 800 feet. He looks up. "You dove to 800 feet?" Emerson nods. The officer asks if he is certain about the altitude. Emerson is certain. The officer makes a note, underlines it twice, and moves on. The rest of the debriefing is procedural. Emerson is dismissed without comment. He does not know if he will be commended or court-martialed. The line between innovation and insubordination is invisible until someone else draws it. 3 days later, Commander Dalton calls Emerson into his office. Dalton is a career officer, a veteran of Midway, a man who values discipline and doctrine. He does not invite Emerson to sit. He asks one question: "Can you teach it?" Emerson considers. The maneuver requires precise timing, absolute trust in the aircraft's structural limits, and a willingness to ignore every survival instinct. Most pilots will not be able to execute it, but some will. Emerson tells Dalton, yes, it can be taught. Dalton nods. You have 2 weeks. Train volunteers. We will evaluate results. Emerson runs 6 training sessions with 14 pilots. He teaches the theory first. Energy states, structural limits, the psychology of the Zero pilot who commits to a pursuit dive. Then he demonstrates in the air, starting with conservative pull-out altitudes and gradually lowering them as the pilots gain confidence. 3 pilots wash out, unable to overcome the instinct to pull out early. The remaining 11 master the technique. They practice until the maneuver becomes muscle memory. Dive past safety margins, trust the airframe, pull at the last possible instant. On their next combat mission, 4 of those pilots use the tactic. All 4 survive encounters that should have killed them. 2 report confirmed 0 kills from pursuit overshoots. The tactic spreads quietly. No official doctrine change, no training manual revision, but squadron commanders begin mentioning it in briefings as an option, a last resort when climb-out is impossible. Pilots call it the Emerson maneuver, though Emerson never claims ownership. He simply continues flying missions, training new pilots, refining the technique. Loss rates among SBD squadrons begin to decline measurably, not dramatically, not universally, but enough that intelligence officers notice and analysts compile reports attributing improved survival to evasive diving tactics. Emerson flies 47 combat missions. On mission 48, a routine patrol on November 3, 1943. His engine fails during takeoff. Mechanical failure, nothing exotic. The SBD rolls inverted and crashes into the water 200 yards from the carrier. Emerson and Chen are killed instantly. Recovery crews find the wreckage, but no bodies. The ocean keeps them. Emerson's name appears in casualty lists. His personnel file is archived. His notebook, filled with calculations and sketches, is sent home to his parents in Oregon. They do not understand the equations. They keep it anyway. The tactic survives him, passed from pilot to pilot, squadron to squadron, a small piece of physics that saves lives in a war built on firepower. His name fades, the idea endures.